we are made of stars. We are made of stardust, not in a, I'm going to stencil this on a mug and sell it on Etsy kind of way. It's the carbon in your muscles, the iron in your blood, the elements that make up most of you actually do come from stars. And so, as much as I might hate myself from time to time or feel lost, an identity that I can always have is I am made of stars. I am made to glow. There is a part of me inside, the most essential part, that cannot be harmed, cannot be damaged, cannot be lost. I just have to clear away everything that's dimming it. And that's what glow is all about. It's about returning to yourself. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to make something up. You don't have to develop a new personality. It's how do we clear away all the damage? And I think online people are like, you can't be damaged. Yes, you can. What? Like, look around the world. You definitely can be damaged. You definitely can be hurt. Like, what are we even talking about? But that core essential self actually can't be that stardust self. So how do we return to the stardust self? And I try to give small practical ways, questions, practices of how I discovered my stardust self.
Welcome my guest, Tara Schuster. Tara is a former Comedy Central executive turned mental health advocate and best-selling author. She's the author of Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies, a finalist for Goodreads Best Nonfiction Book of 2020, and selected by Cosmopolitan, Real Simple, Goop, Publishers Weekly, and many more for one of the year's best books on mental health and self-care, as well as her new book, Glow in the Fucking Dark, Simple Practices to Heal Your Soul from Someone Who Learned the Hard Way. Previously, Schuster served as a vice president of talent and development at Comedy Central, where she was the executive in charge of such critically acclaimed shows as the Emmy and Peabody award-winning Key and Peele. She shares her story along with honest and practical lessons for healing your past, owning your future so that you can radiate strength, bravery, and joy when life gets dark. Right, I am welcoming on Tara. Oh my gosh, I see. Starting off the episode.
It was just in your head.
Yeah, I need to make sure I introduce this fabulous lady correctly. So Tara Schuster, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. So I'm really excited to go into this conversation because, more I learned about you and reading your book, as I said, I finished last night. There's one thing for therapists, psychologists, healers to talk about healing. It's another thing to hear from somebody that has been through the depths of really, really deep trauma and has spent years and years trying to heal yourself. And that's something you did on your own, and you went through lots of trials and errors and, ups and downs. But I just think your story alone and how you share it, there is somebody listening right now that I feel needs to hear it. And I feel the lessons you have learned are really powerful. And it's through somebody that actually did the healing, like learned the things that worked, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I have a little bit of imposter syndrome because I'm like, I didn't go to school for this. I'm not a theologian. I was a comedy executive. I have no background in this topic whatsoever, except that I've spent my 10,000 hours on the other side of the couch. I've made real and lasting change in my life that I know I have because I walk through the world so much differently than I used to. And for me, writing in this genre of sort of self-care and memoir was never a part of my plan. My plan was I'm going to be a big TV executive. That really was the goal. But I wrote, I was basically writing notes about how I was reparenting myself and trying to return to whatever my internal spark was. And those notes became both books, both of my books. It wasn't like I set out to be a mental health advocate person. It was just, this was the byproduct of actually doing the work. And I figured, I wish someone had handed me this book. I wish somebody had, just said, oh, I've been through a lot of that too. And here are some of the tools I used, as opposed to a self-help book, which can be really like heady. And, they're like, feel joy, let go. And it's like, cool. Yeah. Obviously, I would like to let go, but what are steps 1 through 3? Like, how do you actually do that? So that's really my intention with both of my books.
Yes, absolutely. And your book is so cheeky. It's like you said, you from your background being in entertainment and comedy, it's like it's an entertaining read. And so this is the book for anybody watching on YouTube, Glow in the Effing Dark. We could swear around here, so Glow in the Fucking Dark. I love, as you can see, it's such an attractive, like eye-catching book, and I immediately was like, I got to read this because I talk about like reigniting your light, as I mentioned. So it's really finding that, like reclaiming that inner radiance that has been dimmed by all these things we've been through, that a lot of people have been through. There's the big T and there's a small T, and we're going to talk about some of your big T. So the other thing I wanted to mention, so you said you have 2 books. So if you could talk about your first book, which is Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies, can you kind of give us some synopsis on what that first book was, and then now, what brought you to birthing this book?
Yeah, so Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies is basically the story of how I reparented myself, how I became my own parent. And it comes from, I grew up in a neglected, psychologically abusive house where things came to die. It was like all of the plants died, all of the pets died. It was just like a miserable place to be. Not because there was some ancient curse upon our house, but my parents just did not know and could not learn how to take care of kids. So I often describe my own childhood as like somewhat feral. Like me and my sister were just kind of like doing our own thing very early on. And because there were no parents around, I really turned to external validation from my teachers to tell me I was good, tell me I was worthy, get good grades. So the lesson I took away from my childhood is I am worthless. I am worthless because nobody's taking care of me. If I wasn't worthless, wouldn't my parents be doing something? And the only way to get love is to achieve. And so, in some ways, that served me because I ended up going to an Ivy League college, then getting my first job at Comedy Central, and then really quickly climbing up the corporate ladder. So, on the outside, everything looked really, really good. And I was getting myself to safe spaces where I could like have some financial stability. It wasn't all bad, this drive for external validation. But on the inside, I was just miserable. I mean, I would walk down the streets of Manhattan and the diss track in my head was, you're ugly, you're unlovable, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. It was like basically my mantra from age when I could start thinking to maybe my late 20s. And, and I'd be the girl like sobbing on the subway next to you. It was just always kind of a mess when I wasn't at work. And I might have kept going this way, really hustling for my worth at work, but then imploding at home and trying to self-medicate that with weed. Weed was my particular let's zone out, thank you very much, drug of choice. Except that on my 25th birthday, I drunk dialed my therapist, threatening to kill myself. And the next morning I woke up so soul level ashamed of myself and scared because as I listened to my therapist's voicemails, she was trying to find me. And she was this like perma-calm European woman who in our sessions always had like a cup of tea and, a very composed demeanor. But she sounded scared in her messages, which made me feel scared. And that day I decided it's time to get real. I do not have parents in the sense of parents who would nurture you. Like, yes, I'm alive and nobody nurtured me. Nobody is going to nurture me. Nobody's coming to my rescue. I didn't have aunts, uncles. There was nobody stepping up to the plate at all. So I decided I'm going to have to be my own parent. How do you do that? like the good student slash worker bee that I was, I, relied on my favorite tool of all time, a Google Doc, and just wrote down all the questions I had. What are values? What are principles? What are vegetables? Like, genuinely, what are they? Which one should I be eating? I still kind of have that question. And then I attacked it. I just attacked all these questions I had by reading memoirs like they were self-help, by listening to every podcast I could get my hands on, by asking my friends' parents, like, how do you live? I was just like a sponge. I was just taking everything. And by the end of 5 years, I had a 600-page Google Doc, and I felt like a completely different person. And that, and I was an executive at Comedy Central at that time, but I had reparented myself in that time. And that was when I realized I have an offering. Like, I just went through something, took notes, and I would like these notes to help one other person. And if it could help one other person, then it'd be worth it to turn these notes into something else. And that's what Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies is. It's rituals and habits and almost like tricks for finding stability in your life, because I was just on an emotional yo-yo. Like, I had no emotional regulation whatsoever. My life was just a series of crises happening to me. Like, my whole life was just happening to me until I took the reins and said, oh, wait a minute. It's a way better life when you're in the driver's seat, and you're not just flooded constantly by whatever external thing is going on. And so Lilies, it came out in the pandemic, and it, had a pretty warm reception, which gave me the ability to think about, oh, well, maybe I don't want to be an executive. Maybe actually this feels better, like working with people, telling stories. And just as I was kind of mulling that over, Comedy Central made the decision for me. They laid me off, unceremoniously. I had worked there for 1/3 of my life.
Wow.
Like, that's the only job I ever had. I started as an intern at The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and I ended as vice president of talent and development, where I oversaw shows like the sketch show Key and Peele, work with David Spade, all of these. I really was like a company man, like. And they just laid off my ass as quickly as, they needed to at the top of the pandemic. They laid off my whole department. So it wasn't personal, it was just, this is all gone now. Yeah, the timing of it. And I, alone in my apartment, I didn't have a partner. My family doesn't live around here. We were all so scared. Like, if I see you, is it going to kill me? Am I going to kill you? So I'm like cooped up in my 1-bedroom apartment, no job, nobody telling me what to do, totally lost. And in that space, I think because I actually had a pretty good level of stability, all the work of Lilies had given me like pretty good stability. My darkest traumas came to the surface, I think, because I could finally deal with them. Like, I actually had the space to deal with them. But that's not how it felt. How it felt was I was full body sick with these memories, and I wanted to push them away. I didn't want to deal with them. Like, they were coming up. I didn't want to deal with them. So I pretty immediately decided I need to make meaning of my life. Like, I need to do something big. So it was the 2020 election. I Googled, how can I help in the 2020 election? It said, you can register voters in Arizona. And like in 2 days, I grabbed my Vitamix, I grabbed like a stack of books that I would never read and moved myself to Flagstaff, Arizona. And on the road to get there, I had a complete dissociative episode, just like, and probably the worst of my life. I could see my hands on the steering wheel, but they felt completely disconnected from my body. I felt like I was in danger, but didn't really know how to stop, and it really took, my therapist actually called me on that drive and told me, pull over. And that was the first time in my life where I realized I can't keep overwhelming myself through this. Like, self rejection is not going to lead to self-acceptance.
Right.
Like beating my way into health, hating my way into health is not going to get me the life I want. I've got to pause and reevaluate. And that's what Glow in the Fucking Dark is all about, is when you pause, who are you? Without a job, without how other people are defining you, who actually are you? What is that unique spark that you have? And so Glow is all about practical tools and my little weird stories of how I found my own spark.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Thank you for sharing all that and part of your story. So, just to kind of go a little deeper into that. So, I know some of the things, one thing I think it's really great to mention is your first discovery of safety. And I think this
Mm,
is a big one to pull out because I think a lot of people don't realize when these certain things come up, meaning like you had like this awakening because you had the silence to actually hear, like, trauma always resurfaces if we don't fully heal it. And so I think
yeah.
that sometimes people can't recognize what their triggers are coming from, like the root of them. So can you kind of share your experience with safety and what
Yeah.
you learned from that?
Totally. So I love to go on solo vacations. I've been to Rome alone. I've been to Paris alone. I've hiked and camped in Zion alone. And my friends always say something like, "Wow, you're so brave," or "That's so cool." And I never I that it seems obvious to me actually that you would like go do these things alone. They're like, "Aren't you scared?" I'm like, "What would I even be scared about?" So that was like, it never occurred to me that perhaps I was doing something a little bit dangerous. And actually, um I was on a my solo hiking camping adventure in Zion, and I haven't told anyone this before, but the way I even knew how to like pitch a tent was I went to my best friend's house and she showed me how, and I took like videos like step by step, and then I camped in her backyard in the OC, probably the safest environment on planet Earth. So I wasn't like an expert, by any means. And I'm camping and I decide I'm not a real camper. I'm going to get takeout food. I'm not going to try to use this weird stove. And I go to this restaurant. And as I'm waiting for my takeout, I hear this dad talking to his kids. And he's saying, tomorrow we're going to go canyoneering. I've never been canyoneering before, but I've hired a guide. So even if it feels scary, you're going to be safe. I'm going to be there. You're going to be safe. And it was like, like mind explosion. Oh my God, parents tell their kids that they're going to be safe and actually set up the circumstances so that they are safe. It had never occurred to me that safety was even a thing,
Mm.
much less that parents provide safety to their children. And this realization, just hearing that one sentence, I was like, wow, it's probably not great to live 10 out of 10 hypervigilant, always scanning your environment for threats. It's probably not great that I never think about my safety. I just live in a world where safety doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I kind of saw that and then built my own safe space in my journal, actually, of all things, that I realized how important safety was. And that if you don't feel safe, it's really hard to do much of anything because you're so constricted. Like it's really hard to like dream or really be your full self if you're also scared all the time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be scared about today, like the plague, systematic oppression. There's like
Craziness.
many reasons many of us don't feel safe. And I'm so sorry, but if you can't find internal safety, you're never going to feel safe. Like the world's going to keep coming at us, and it feels like it's coming at us harder and harder. And so the question is, how do we find a place within ourselves that is calm, that is stable, where you feel a modicum of safety?
And you said one of those ways you did was through journaling. Is that one of the
Yeah.
tools that you recommend, or what would be some other tools to find that inner peace?
Journaling, I would say, is my number one. And if anybody wanted to jumpstart their prioritizing their mental health, I would say get a journal. It's a form of almost free therapy. You know, it's the pen and the paper that you need to pay for. But all of these journeys start with self awareness. And journaling is an incredible way to pretty quickly get more self aware because you have to confront yourself on the page. And I had been journaling for a long time, but now I realized that my journal was really a place that was mine, that nobody else could comment upon, tear down, that I could say anything. All my emotions were safe. I think a lot of times people don't heal because they think it will overwhelm them. Like they get the thought, I should deal with this. And then the follow up is, that's overwhelming and it's going to ruin my life. Like I can't even deal with that. And by journaling, you see, none of these thoughts are going to ruin your life. They're already doing that. You know, like the
Yeah.
recognizing of them is not the problem. And so I find journaling specifically because it's also a physical object that you can like hide and that's outside of you. Like you're getting all these thoughts out of your head and onto the page. I find that journaling is a really safety forward practice that really helped me. So that's sort of the first thing I'd say. But then, you know, things like the book gets into meditation and a form of therapy called internal family systems and many, many other techniques for finding safety. But basically, if you're doing anything for your mental health, you are working on your safety. You know, like all these things. If you go to trauma therapy, typically the first things you do in sessions is build safety with your therapist because
True.
so many, you've been traumatized, you need to feel safe. And so finding like, you know, I would say journaling is the
Yeah.
number one, you know, quick fix free that I would recommend.
I think that's so true. It's all about self-awareness, right? I think that's the foundation of any change to happen. And so, like you said, being able to take like your busy mind and actually like extract it, put it on paper and actually look at it, confront it, and be able to comprehend what you're even thinking. Because we can run in all these thoughts, but if we don't, it's so much easier when you visually see it. You could
Yeah.
process it in a different manner. So I think that's perfect tool for anybody to start with. And I love that you shared that was one of your processes because you weren't even probably noticing what was running in your head so much because you were just busy,
Yeah.
busy, busy. Or
Very few of us, if we don't pause and label what is happening, it's just happening to us. I mean, and then even worse, sometimes we dismiss how we feel like, well, I have a pretty good life, so I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't have this emotion. I don't want this emotion, and we reject it. And that's a huge problem because whether you should or should not feel some way is completely an irrelevant question. You do feel that way and you have to deal with that. You know, you have to deal with reality. And so another tool I give people is an emotion wheel.
Mm.
And I include one in the book, but you could also just Google emotion wheel and there are tons of them. I like mine, but everyone should just get their hands on any emotion wheel they can. And basically what it is my vocabulary for my feelings had been reduced to good, bad, sad, tired, busy.
Mm.
Those 5 words, you know, described the miracle of my life. Like that's how I described this beautiful thing on planet Earth. And it wasn't until my therapist recommended an emotion wheel that I even realized, whoa, I have so many more emotions. There are so many other ways I feel. And once you can label an emotion, you can do something about it. You know, if you're feeling super sad and melancholy, you then can see that and make a choice about what you're going to do. If you're joyful, ecstatic, creative, you can also make a choice about what you're going to do, you know, like savor this moment. So I find that an emotion wheel is also an excellent tool for building that self-awareness, seeing, this is how I actually feel, and it's okay that I feel this way.
Yeah. I love that. I never knew about the emotional wheel, but I think it, like you said, naming how you feel, I think that's a different way to process it instead of like pushing it aside like that. What do they call it? The positive, I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. Not positive, toxicity, or what was it?
Oh, yeah, toxic positivity.
Yes. Yeah. It's
We're
kind of
just
like,
like, it's
oh,
great. This is the silver lining.
yeah.
That's not helpful.
No, yeah, we need to process our feelings. So, uh, one thing I wanted to talk about is when you got laid off from your job, you said you were working there for so long, where I imagine very much of your identity, especially because you seeked for so long outside validation, like getting the awards or whatever it may be. Which I know there's a story about that, but we'll get into that later. But how would you recommend somebody that feels, because so many people have gone through transitions in the last few years, and a lot of it is tied to identity and,
Mm,
possibly changing careers and whatnot. What would you suggest to somebody to be able to shift into a new identity with
mm.
ease, if you want to say? Because I know it's really challenging, that a lot of people struggle with and maybe don't even realize they're being tied to something external.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I think it's hard no matter what. At this point, I feel a lot better about navigating transitions in my own identity, and it still sucks, because we want what's comfortable, we want what has been, and something like getting laid off is just a sucky, terrible experience, no matter how you slice or dice it. And I had resources, savings. There was no financial stress. And I, at that point, when I was introduced, it would be Tara Schuster, Comedy Central, like it was my married last name, you
Yeah.
know? And I pointed to this job to say, I'm not a weirdo. I had a weird childhood. Sure. Yeah, I was neglected, all these things, but I win. I win. I have this such a cool job. It's so glamorous. It's so much status. Look at me, And then the second it was gone, it's like, wait, what is me? And I think one of the most essential things that we don't pay enough attention to is, where do you get your self esteem from? Like, and really actively deciding where you get your self-esteem from. And if you're getting your self-esteem from promotions, how your boss sees you, how your kids see you, if you were asked to be a bridesmaid, if you're getting them from anyone but you have put yourself in a very bad situation, because everything can be taken away from you. And if we've learned in the past 3 years anything, it's that that's the truth. That's the nature of our lives. And all of it passes. And so I really ask readers to choose their unshakable, untakeawayable sources of self esteem, things that make you feel proud. And, it's, for me, it's really simple. It's writing. Doesn't matter how my book performs. It's just, did I show up to try? Um, Using my physical body. So I don't have to be the most in shape person ever, but I feel proud of myself when I sweat. I'm like, yeah, I did this. And the third is prioritizing relationships. So even this weekend, here's an example of how it works. I know that that's where I get my self esteem. I know that prioritizing relationships makes me feel proud and makes me feel happy. So on Sunday, there were a bunch of stuff I could do. One of them was visit my aunt in a rehabilitation center. She was just hospitalized, and now she's getting better from it. And, it's kind of out of the way, and I'm going to see her soon. And I was like, no, I am going to prioritize this because it makes me feel good about me. It has like nothing to do with what she thinks or feels. It's
Mhm.
completely selfish, and it leads to my least selfish outcomes when I really, it's what I want. And so identifying your self-esteem, identifying what you actually prioritize, and making that your identity, as opposed to a job, a familial role, being in charge of that, that changes everything.
Yeah. So it would be asking yourself, like, what are your values? What is
Mm-hmm.
your priorities? Like, what makes you come alive? That is
Yeah.
part of who you are truly, because, and that's what's so unique about all of us. We all have different things that make us come alive. Like you said, writing. Some people hate writing, some people hate reading,
Yeah.
but like, I love reading at the beach or by the pool. It's like, that's my zone. Like, I feel at peace then. So yeah, it's finding those things you value and what makes you come alive. Absolutely.
And doing them.
And doing them, scheduling them and doing
Identifying
them.
them
Yes.
and doing them.
Most
Yeah.
most importantly, because it's so easy to neglect these things. I think once you identify them, this is where journaling really comes in, is once you identify it, like, be like, okay, how often am I doing this thing that makes me come alive? Am I just like
Yeah.
working my tail off and not fitting in the things that make me come alive? So it's so true.
Yeah. And if I could just offer one tool to anybody who's listening right now, one of my favorite journal prompts of all time is what even happened last month? So you get out your phone or wherever your calendar is and you go through what even happened last month. Who did you have plans with? How did you spend your time? Do you remember what your mood was like? Do you remember what the big problems were, what the big wins were? Because often this is all gets really theoretical and like in your brain. Like, I prioritize family. Okay, cool. But did you actually? Like, look,
Mhm.
like, did you? And if not, how can you change things for next month? And so I think I always do it. I do it periodically through the year, but like in January in particular, I do a what even happened last year, you know, because we just don't want our lives to slip through our fingers. And if we don't stop and pay attention, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. It's making me think. I have my planner on my table right now, and it's called the Life Mastery Planner. I got this
Hmm.
off of Amazon. And basically, what it does is every month it has a check in, and it has the life wheel. You probably can't see it, but this is like
Mm-mm.
all the questions and whatnot. But it has like, celebrate my top 10 achievements. What's in harmony? So it says like the wheel of life. What did I learn in the last 90 days? How could I bring more harmony in my life? What were my distractions, my mental? Anyways, you're making me think of that because, and I don't do it all the time, but I think this planner is brilliant. I can plug it in the show notes for anybody interested, because I think it's so good to reflect and then also be like, okay, what didn't work this month? Maybe
Yeah.
I could plug in something, and it's, again, it's all about self-awareness, reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's self-awareness and then agency, because you realize, oh, I can do all this. This is not overwhelming. It's not overwhelming to change the details of my life, to lead a life I actually love, to lead a life that's filling me with energy, not dread. And if I could, one thing I really want people to take away from the book is you have so much more agency than you think you do over your life. It's that you have to start inwards out, and it sucks, and we all know that to some level, right? That it's we have very little time here, and it's, the best things in life are free. We all know these cliches are true, and they are true. And so you have to like start working from the inside out. And I can just promise anyone that your life will be easier. Start with one of these things, and I promise, I can guarantee your life will be easier and you will feel more contentment. But if you don't do these things, you just kind of keep being complacent. And,
And the same cycle continues, right?
yeah,
Everything will
exactly.
always come back full circle. Yeah. Okay. So you talk about the self rejection. And I think one of the things you mentioned in the book is, I mean, you have a lot of layers to what you've experienced in your life, up in your upbringing. One of the things I know is not, I think, not loving your body and
Mm.
having like a hatred to your body. And I know that stems from something, as you mentioned in the book, but how did you work through that as you went through your healing process? Because I think so many, especially women, there's men too that feel this way, but like reject their bodies. And if you're
Yeah.
rejecting your body, how could you feel at home in your body? Right. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I not to be a total bummer, but I was subject to physical investigations of my body that were extremely violating. Starting from as early as I can remember, I'd like be pinned to the carpet and my mom would kind of like poke and prod at me in a way that was supposed to be, she was a doctor, so it was supposed to be somehow medical, but really was like humiliating, terrible. Like when I think about a child, if somebody who wasn't me was subjected to that, I would call the police. Like, now I can see like, wow, that really was so bad.
Mm.
And so from the jump, I just remember after these investigations, I would look in the mirror of my parents' bathroom and just feel hot waves of shame. It's like, and I would feel those waves periodically into my adulthood, like that total rejection of this thing that feels icky. It felt bad. And I developed breasts really early and didn't know what to do with them, at all. And also, my parents got divorced. It was a miserable divorce. I had no like mother figure of any kind. And so I just felt terrible about my body. To the point where, if you're in the girls' locker room and you're changing, I was one of those girls who like was getting my bra off from under a sweatshirt, from under a towel, like doing these weird the Olympics of getting your clothes off without anybody else seeing you, like an ounce of your flesh. And in Lilies, I worked my way up to feeling better about myself by just doing it. Like by stop talking about how much I don't like my body and going in like to a Korean spa, or I was in Japan with my best friend and just being naked with other women. Just fucking doing it instead of obsessing and then realizing nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody is looking at me. Nobody's, pointing at my quote unquote problem area. And in fact, this water feels really, really good on my body, And so that was step one, was just kind of going for it, wearing bikinis, even though I didn't feel like I could or should, just, whatever the opposite of how I felt about my body, acting in that way. And as this has developed, what I've really come to realize is body gratitude is the only thing that makes me feel good. There's so many different, I feel like this has all become so political. There's body neutrality, body positivity, body gratitude. Wow. I woke up again this morning. Holy moly. I can breathe for yet another day. I breathe, and we take it so for granted, except it's not. It's like the most precious thing we have is our body. It protects us. It moves us through our lives. Everybody is like an actual miracle. Like, so for me, and even this week, we were talking about, I got COVID and strep. And so I've just been eating like garbage, like totally just processed garbage, not the way I would normally eat. And I feel pretty bad, and I have to remind myself, wait a minute, my body just fought off two horrible things. Wow. Thank you, body. I'm sorry that I was so tired that all I gave you was like carbed or boxed carbs, like macaroni and cheese. Yeah. Very processed.
Yeah.
And we're not going to beat ourselves up about that. That was the best we could do in that situation. And now, little by little, I'm going to try to fill you with nutrients, as opposed to, wow, I feel bloated. I hate myself. Why did I eat all that food? That was terrible. It's recognizing, wow, my body did a really good job. So it, gratitude always flips the story from what you don't have to all the miracles that surround you, the reality of the situation. And so I really do find that thanking your body in your journal, in words, as much as you can thank your body, it really, really helps understand the truth that you are not one little quote unquote flaw. You have this incredible body that, how does it even work? Like, why? It's like mysterious and wonderful. So that's sort of how I've overcome a lot of my body image issues.
That's great. I think it's a great thing to mention the food. Like there's I forgot who told me this or where I heard it, but like, are you treating your body like a Ferrari or are you treating it like a rental car?
Yeah.
Because what you put in your mouth, what you put in your body, it's either going to improve your health or it's going to diminish your health. Like there is like, it's one or the
Yeah.
other. And so I love
Yeah.
that you bring that up. Is like, that's a great way to start loving your body is how are you nourishing it? Are you treating it
Yeah.
like a rental car or a Ferrari? What, if you want to keep it running, like be grateful, like that you have the ability to buy at least a healthier option of food and they're able to feed your body the right way. So I love that.
Yeah. And not beating yourself up at all about making a quote unquote unhealthy decision. Whatever, it's in the past. It's not like, don't rake yourself over the coals for the bag of pretzels you just inhaled. Like, that's not good for you either. So
Yeah.
it's like more of a balance of accepting all parts of yourself. And exactly as you said, eating food that actually makes you feel good, without a lot of judgment. It's so hard. It's so
Well,
hard, this whole topic.
yeah, well, I think that with the self-awareness, and I think this is why self-awareness is the foundation of change, is like the more you, let's say you eat something bad and you're aware that you ate something bad and you feel like shit after you ate it, then you're like, well, I don't want to feel like shit anymore. I
Right.
feel horrible. I did that. Now you can make a better decision because you have awareness that you just did that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a foundation, right? But uh also, so there's one thing I've heard you say that grief and gratitude always live together. And I know
Mhm.
one of, and I know, well, I don't want to talk about this yet because it's kind of the end of your book. We'll get into it, but I know you talk about the grief and the gratitude. But why do you state that in itself, like grief and gratitude always live together?
Because I think we can become very myopic about our lives. We lose our job and I'll say this as someone who did lose their job. I feel I have the authority to say this. We lose our job and own everything. This takes up my whole field of vision. I'm lamenting it. I'm sad. I'm upset. I'm stressed out. What's next? If you can't also be grateful that you're alive, for me, that I was alive in a pandemic, that I really didn't have to worry that moment about how I was going to feed myself, that I had enough financial stability, that all these other, one thing I thought about was I will never be homeless because I know enough people who would come to my rescue, that there were all these amazing things that not everyone has that cannot be taken for granted. And so grief and gratitude, they're just in it, they're tied to one another, because that's actually the truth. The truth isn't I got a promotion, and the truth isn't I lost my job. The truth is a much bigger picture.
Hmm.
And that actually, these times have been so trying, and who knows if they've been trying in particular, or now we just have so much more media telling us what's happening, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
always like, is it the times are worse or just we're more aware? um if you hook on to the purely negative, you are not seeing reality. Because outside my window there are beautiful green trees and California sun, and I'm alive today, and those things really, really matter. So I always say that's not toxic positivity. If it was toxic positivity, it would be saying the bad feelings that I'm feeling or the things that I'm observing that are negative, I just reject those.
Hmm.
No, this is saying I acknowledge that's happening. I acknowledge this is how I feel, and look at that tree. How did this tree get born? I don't even know. How are trees born? A mystery,
And let me just
Yeah.
I also want to share this. So Tara is literally, like I said, she went through years and years of healing herself, and reading her book and everything. I've learned this of you, that initially when you started a gratitude practice, you said like,
Mm-mm.
how do I even do that? What do I have to be grateful for? And so a lot of people I know, sometimes, especially when you're in the lowest of lows and you're dealing with so much, it's hard to find that thing you're grateful for. So I think that, you are living proof that the little things, like I remember I did this practice for about a month, I think, is let me just find 3 little things I'm grateful for. I don't do like the morning, like, let me write down the things I'm grateful for. I just haven't, I can't keep to that practice. I think it's beautiful. I love people that do this, but I just said, I'm just going to walk through my days and look for 3 things I could be grateful for. And then you start to notice so much because
Mm.
you're telling yourself, look for it, you'll
Mm-hmm.
find it. And so it's the simple things like, again, as you mentioned, if you don't love your body right now, at least think of it like you got legs, you got arms, if you do, I mean, like, just
Yeah.
or you're breathing, like you're healthy,
Yeah.
you have life or health insurance, whatever it may be, like you have that.
Anything.
Yeah, anything. It's like you could go on, you could, if you ask yourself the question, you could find the answer for sure.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up, if you don't know me, I maybe sound a little woo woo right now and like, gratitude's amazing. Oh my God. The reason I started a gratitude practice to begin with was that a woman who had gone to Harvard, then turned into a professional ballerina, then turned into a lawyer, saw me having a panic attack and said, "Have you tried a gratitude practice?" She was a wasp that was so waspy that her family came to America on the Arabella, which
Mm.
was the second boat after the Mayflower.
Wow.
Like, she's telling me to be grateful. Like she has a family compound, infinite wealth, all these things. She's telling me to be grateful. Yeah, if I had those things, I'd be fucking grateful too. But I don't. And my childhood sucked. And, up until my late 20s, I really had a chip on my shoulder. And so I tried to have a gratitude practice, feeling no gratitude whatsoever and to spite her. So that at the end, I could say, "You were wrong. See, like, this stupid gratitude practice won't work for me." So, I did it. And like like the first day, I was like, "I am grateful for water." And then I was like, "Oh, yeah, I am grateful for my health. Oh, yeah, that's actually a really big deal. I'm grateful for my sister. I have so much to be grateful for." So, anybody who's listening, I'm a skeptic. Like, I don't believe in any of these things until I try them. And
Yeah.
I hate to admit that a gratitude practice really does work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so many people, obviously there's books about it. Like, and there's a
Yeah.
whole, like, what, 5-minute journal that's about the gratitude practice pretty much. So talking back to the external validation, you have an experience where you learned that for so long you were seeking external validation, and then there was this, you kind of like slapped in the face of why that's not working for you anymore. And I think this is so many of us, without knowing it, we do seek out outside validation. It's kind of like a human experience, like we all do,
Yeah,
right? We all want to
totally.
be validated or feel worthy, but if we're running our lives by that, we're just going to keep running into the wall. So your experience with that, and what was that change? Because I know it's about learning to enjoy the process instead of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I
Can you tell I
worked
read
in
your book, by the way?
oh my God, I'm like, you definitely read my book. I'm like, every detail. I'm like, wow. I'm honored. Cause sometimes you go on a podcast and they have no idea. They're like, basically like, "Who are you?" Like, all
I've
right.
heard it's funny because I listen to podcasts a lot, and I've heard listening to a podcast, and I remember somebody saying at the top of the episode, like, what did he say? Oh my gosh, it just was mind blowing to me. Like, you literally don't even know who you're even inviting on your show, but it was like, can you just say who you are and what you do, and like
Yeah.
it just. it was silly, but yeah.
No, so I appreciate that you actually read and seem to have liked my book. So thank you.
Yes, it was great.
Thank you. So yeah, I worked in Hollywood. That was my whole career. And in Hollywood, obviously, it's no shock. Everything is about external validation. What were the ratings? Did people like it? Did they laugh? Did they cry? Did you get an emotional response out of someone? And it was definitely my least favorite part of the job, particularly Emmy season, because people go crazy. Like like somebody who's usually pretty stable is all of a sudden a part of a campaign to win an Emmy, and that's all we're talking about. And then everybody's getting like so much Botox that they're like frozen in time because they're going to go to the Emmys and they want to look really good. I hated Emmy season until I was nominated for an Emmy. And then I was like, I love Emmy season. This is so cool. Yay. Like, should I get Botox? What kind of dress should I wear? Should we do a big campaign for this? Immediately, like all of my reservations were gone. And people reached out to me from my past. My dad, who I have a very complicated relationship with, he was super proud of me. And I felt like I was in the top of the world. Now forever, it'll be Emmy nominated Tara Schuster. You know, like that'll be my PhD or my doctorate. And I was at dinner with a bunch of my colleagues after this nomination, and I get a phone call from my boss's boss's boss. I'm like, weird. You don't want to see your boss's boss's boss on your phone. And he's calling to say, you know, about that Emmy, it's not really a great look for you to be on the nomination because you're a development executive now. And to explain the difference, I had been a producer and I produced this web series that I just had the most fun making. It was like my love was to make this web series. It was with two comedians who are by far the most brilliant people I've ever met and kind. And my job was to make something with them, you know, and we got to the point where I was in charge of the edit, which meant these comedians were trusting me and my timing for jokes. To me, that was like the biggest deal in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
So I had produced that, but I had gotten elevated to this other department called development, which is the people who actually run the shows. They don't make the shows, they like run it from, you know, on high at the network. So I had just moved into development. And so he was saying, in this new role, you know, you're supposed to take a back seat to the talent. You're supposed to be running things. You're not supposed to be making things. You're not supposed to be in the trenches. Don't you think it's going to look bad? Don't you think artists are going to think it's weird that you're on the Emmy nomination? Despite the fact that I actually did the work. Like I did that work. And as we all know, when you're transitioning between jobs, all it usually means is you're doing both jobs at once. So he made it very clear that I shouldn't be on the Emmy nomination. And, you know, he left it up to me. He said, okay, but it's up to you. You know, either you can Emmy unnominate yourself or you can stay on it and it's just a bad look. So what was I going to do? You know, I Emmy unnominated myself. I had done all this work. I had gotten the external validation and I had to let it all go. And I was devastated. Oh, and humiliated because it was such a public thing. I wondered, are people going to ask when when they see the nomination, why is my name not there? You know? And so from that moment on, I just realized I can't go through this again. I can never let external validation be the be all end all. It's really, if I look back at it, the thing that I loved was the process, getting to know those comedians, being a part of something beautiful, you know, being creative. And it's, you know, we all hear over and over, it's the journey, not the destination. But how many of us live that way? You know, truly understanding that it really is the process, the learning, the how did you come to that place? That's the good stuff. The end goal, if you're addicted to end goals, like if I get this, then I'll be happy. If I get this promotion and buy a house, then I'll be settled. it just doesn't work. It's never worked for anybody. It's not going to work for you. It doesn't work for me. It's really about what work did you put into this? How did it feel to do it? What people did you meet? What was the journey? And typically when I focus on process, my outcomes are amazing. Amazing things come about, and there's all this synchronicity, and I meet somebody who I would have never met if I had been totally myopic and like tied to, I need this specific outcome to be okay. So there's nothing like being Emmy unnominated to really teach you once and for all, this external validation thing does not work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's great that you learned that lesson, because I know that's a lot of your journey was needing that external validation. So I'm sure that was a huge shift in your life just by that
Yeah.
transition and reflection, if you want to say, that you went through.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
good. So good. I think everybody could learn something from that. Well, so moving into your book, you have two parts. The second part is glow.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about this, and really the meaning behind your book, Glow in the Fucking Dark. Well, actually, if you could share with us, like, what was your purpose of this book, and talking, like, moving into glow, uh,
Mm-hmm.
what does that chapter really, if you want to say, like, what's that chapter encompass,
Yeah. So, I was
or
telling this
part?
story. Yeah. I was telling the story of so I was trying to outrun all my trauma, outrun being devastated by the loss of my job by going to Arizona and doing something meaningful, quote unquote, like a bigger thing even than my job, the election. And as I'm on the road having this dissociative episode, my therapist said, pull over. And by the time I pulled over, it was nighttime. And I was in the Mojave Desert. And, I live in LA where you cannot see the stars. You're like, that's a star. And then someone says, no, that's a satellite. Like we do not see the stars at night. And so in the desert with very little light pollution, it felt like I was in a star field. Like it felt like I was amongst glitter. And as I looked up at the night sky, which was so dark, and kind of recognized that my own circumstances were pretty bleak, I just wondered, can I shine like those stars? Things are bleak. And can I shine? And I think the reason I thought of that was because we are made of stars. We are made of stardust, not in a I'm going to stencil this on a mug and sell it on Etsy kind of way. It's the carbon in your muscles, the iron in your blood, the elements that make up most of you actually do come from stars. And so, as much as I might hate myself from time to time or feel lost, an identity that I can always have is I am made of stars. I am made to glow. There is a part of me inside, the most essential part, that cannot be harmed, cannot be damaged, cannot be lost. I just have to clear away everything that's dimming it. And that's what glow is all about. It's about returning to yourself. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to make something up. You don't have to develop a new personality. It's how do we clear away all the damage? And I think online people are like, you can't be damaged. Yes, you can. What?
Mhm.
Like, look around the world. You definitely
Yeah.
can be damaged. You definitely can be hurt. Like, what are we even talking about? But that core essential self actually can't be that stardust self. So how do we return to the stardust self? And I try to give small practical ways, questions, practices of how I discovered my stardust self, because it is possible. It sounds huge and big and how could you ever do that, but really with work it is possible.
And you are living proof, and that's why I love that you wrote this book and that you share, all of the things that worked for you. And of course, like with all these things, like the things you share in the book or the things you share in your socials or speaking and whatnot, it's it's tools that people could try on, see if they work, toss this one, love this one, whichever. So I think it's great. And I know you have, actually, I forgot where exactly in the book, but I know it's in the glow section. You have journal prompts that I thought were really, really awesome that I actually wanted to do myself, to be honest.
Oh, great.
If you were to just talking about that, if you were to pull out like 2 or 3 journal prompts that you would suggest somebody to start with to kind of start this healing process to really, again, like as you said, and I talk about this all the time, like reignite your light is all about reclaiming that person that the person you are at your core and returning home to yourself. It's not like
Yes.
you might be lost in everything that you're going through, but the essence of you just return home. So
Yeah.
what would be some of the journaling prompts you would probably suggest to start with?
The very first one would be, how do I feel today? Just getting in touch with how you actually feel. I would say use my emotion wheel, use one you find on Google, and just ask yourself, how do I feel today? And typically it's like 3 rings. So it'll start with sad, and then maybe melancholy, and then depressed or something. And look at that little chain and maybe ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Like labeling it and why, and just noticing. Like you don't need to pass judgment on it. You're just noticing how you feel. And if you're need to self-soothe, if those feelings are very difficult, one thing I do, which is stolen from the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, is I put a hand on my heart and say, I notice my depression and I take good care of my depression. I notice my depression and I take good care of my depression. Because again, I don't know a single person who rejected themselves into mental health. It cannot, like, take away the words get rid of. You're never going to get rid of your depression. You can work with it and heal it, but you can't just toss it out the window. So the very first prompt I would start with was, how do I feel today? And then maybe digging in a little to why. The second I would say would be, I'd probably just start a gratitude practice of some kind, even if it was 3 things that day you had seen, because what you want to do is open the aperture of your life, that there are so many more possibilities and you don't need to hook into one negative story. So it'd probably be, how do I feel today? I would do, how do I feel today? Then just write. Just write what's on your brain, word vomit. That people find really, really hard. So one way to do it is to set a timer for like 3 minutes on your phone. And then what you can write is, I hate this. I hate Tara Schuster. These 3 minutes are truly the worst. I don't want to journal. Write whatever you want. But 3 minutes, commit to yourself. And then I might end with a gratitude practice. That would be a good, I think, solid start to journaling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. One thing I want to bring up is the relationship stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think, in healing, again, if we don't address what is triggering us in healing those parts of us that we're rejecting or abandoning, it will always reflect back in our relationships. It's a mirror, right? At least that's my belief. And I think that's yours as well. And I know you started to address, like, look back at your past relationships or the people you were dating. I don't know if you're dating somebody now, but you started to look at that and try to address why this, like, why is this happening? And I remember, I love this. And I actually pinned, let me see, I tagged it in the book. So hopefully I could find it real quick. But you were noticing most of your friends were married and everybody's in relationships, and you're like obviously getting, which I think a lot of women, as we get older, we think like, and I'm not, and it sucks being, you feel just like smaller around them, or you don't want to hang around them because you're like, this is just like putting it right in front of my face. I'm not with anybody. I love this. Okay. So this is so great in the book. So your friend, you wrote here, I was embarrassed by how long it took me trying to find a mate until a friend said something that completely blew me away. You invested so much time into healing, growing, and venturing. Don't you think it's possible your person has been doing the same? You've both been busy. Isn't it nice to think that right now your future partner is having an epic journey of their own? And because of that, it will be all the more sublime when you finally meet. I think that's such a beautiful message and such a great thing to reflect on, is like, so when you do meet, after you've done your healing or whatever you need to do, that you'll meet a person that could be at the same, if you want to say, I hate to say level, but
Level.
more or less,
Yeah.
right? More synergy and more alignment, because if
Yeah.
you're healed, you're not going to go for somebody that's not healed, if you want to say, because
Totally.
you'll recognize it because you're so self-aware at this point because you've done the work. So you won't attract per se the narcissist or this person that's toxic, you won't
Yeah.
stand for it, right?
And I can definitively say that this works because I took a year off of dating because I was the common denominator in 15 years of bad relationships. Like, I was always dating somebody and it was always the exact same thing. They had an emotional problem. I was trying to fix them. It turned out they were a narcissist. I'm like just too empathetic, and we'd get in this like doom spiral until I'd have to break up with them. And then I would be devastated. And so dating for me was a painful, terrible experience where I never had any fun. Like, fun was completely lacking.
Mm.
And in the book, it's a long story, but maybe I was dating a con artist. I don't even know what this guy's deal was ultimately, but I call him the Great Gatsby IRL. Had like a big personality and like a transatlantic accent, like Mr. Monopoly Man comes to mind. Anyway, he was very high status. That's why I was dating him. And I realized after that ended, I need to stop the bleeding. Like, I'm not doing a good job here. It would be better to pause than to keep hurting myself. And so I took a year off, and I, in that time, made new incredible friends. I wrote a book. I did all these magical things in this year, and it was one of the best years of my life because I wasn't so upset about a guy, frankly. And when I came back to dating, I actually started working with a matchmaker because I think the apps are a disaster. I would never go back on an app because their incentives are not aligned with you. They're there to keep you on the app to make money off you.
That's so
They
bad.
have no reason. That's why I think it's gotten worse and worse. Anyway, I would never go back on an app. Went to the matchmaker, and I went on a few different dates, different matches, and then I met somebody who I can't even believe exists.
That's awesome.
I'm so blown away. And he has been on a multi-year journey to heal his trauma. And so when we talk to one another, we actually really identify and know what's happening. And I can't believe that the thing I always thought was true and wrote in the book, that my person would be on a journey of their own and we both needed to go on our journeys before we met. I mean, it came true.
Wow.
And I don't know if I'm going to be with him forever. And what I do know is that just dating him has given me more hope in the goodness of men, in the possibility that there are some who are really sensitive and loving, and a guy now I know they exist at a minimum. I'm like, oh, wow, you do exist. And so if there's anybody who's single and they're feeling like sad about being single, or your friends are doing it some other way, it really is, that's a bunch of noise. Like, I really can promise, I went through it, that by focusing on yourself, by focusing on your own healing, by being who you actually want to be, you raise the level of the person you're going to attract and meet. And it sounds so woo-woo, except I literally just did this and kind of I'm astounded by it.
That's so amazing. Yeah, I think that gives hope to a lot of people that, regardless, like you want to be the best partner you could be for somebody else, but also for yourself in the process of partnership. So
Yes.
healing is a journey. It can be really painfully hard. It could be long, but it's
Yeah.
so worth it. I mean, this is one life. It's like you'd rather live it like peacefully.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's your time limit, because I wanted to touch on the last chapter as brief as
Sure. Let's do it.
okay. So your last chapter of the book really just like was a tearjerker, number one. And I want people to read the book, so we don't need to give all the cliff notes of it. But this chapter was so powerful, and it was just, I don't even know. I mean, I was moved by it, is I guess
Thank
the
you.
best word. But you talk about the grief and gratitude, and why setting boundaries was so important. And you learn this through your process of doing it with your parents. And again, I know you could go into a whole lengthy thing about it, but if you could kind of just share the cliff notes of that, of how putting healthy boundaries has just radically shifted your life.
Yeah. I mean, so what I talk about in the book is my relationship with my parents and how it worked out setting boundaries. And I'll talk specifically about my dad, which my dad has been my only consistent parent. My mom is unwell, and I haven't spoken to her in 15 years for my own self protection. And, people, because of that, say to me, "Oh, well, you should really try to mend your relationship with your mom. You only get one mom." And my answer to them is try to imagine what it would feel like for you to take that step. Like, try, you know how unnatural it feels to cut your mom out of your life? Think about that. Like, think about what it felt like for me to get to that point, and then tell me to try to like mend my relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had put her at bay. And but my dad, we had a difficult relationship, but we did have a relationship. But I always felt like I was taking care of him and his emotional needs, and I was the parent. And so at the top of COVID, he said something provocative that it was almost like he wanted my sister and I to like be his parent and scold him. And I just said, enough. I, every time I talked to him, was hating him more and more and feeling more and more upset. It was grinding down my love for him. And it was just repeating. It was never getting any better. And so I decided I need a break from my dad. I'm not going to talk to him. I'm going to work on my own emotions. And this lasted for 2 years. The 2 years in the pandemic when families were hopefully coming together, I was squarely not talking to either of my parents. And he got COVID. And the moment he did, he's elderly. He's 78, which even saying that, I'm like, holy moly, I can't believe that. But, the moment I found that out, I didn't care. I didn't care about this pause. I was going to go help him. And when I went to help him, what I found out was the craziest fact of all time, which was that he had started going to therapy to answer the question, why isn't my daughter talking to me?
Mm.
And he had been doing it the entirety of those 2 years. And so when I came back to him, he was, I can't believe it, 180 different. He said things like, I'm proud of you. He thanked me for helping him in his recovery. He would tell me that he loved me, things that just never happened in the past. We started going to therapy together, like family therapy. And now I can say, I never thought I'd have a loving or nurturing dad this whole time, right? I never thought that was in the cards. And I'm so grateful that for whatever amount of time we have together, I have a dad. I have a real loving dad. And I get to taste what it feels like for someone to love you unconditionally, in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And so my takeaway is not tell a person to change and they will, cut a person out of your life and they will. The takeaway is if you don't set a boundary, you are inhibiting somebody else's growth. You are making sure that the situation never changes. why? So you're trying to save their feelings? That's what I usually get, is like, I don't want to be mean. So what's meaner? To continue in a spiral of unhealthy relationship, or to give it a pause, give the other person a chance to change, give yourself some breathing room. And it doesn't have to be forever either. But I think boundaries are a very loving, kind, and generous gift we give to the people around us.
Oh, it's so good. It brings me back to one of my relationships where I learned enabling and
Yeah.
how horrible enabling is, because you're not letting that person flourish and grow by giving them something, or just continue not putting in healthy boundaries. And when
Yeah.
you start putting those, and I'm not going to go into my whole story, but like once you start putting in those healthy boundaries, number one, you could see what happens. Usually when somebody hasn't experienced those boundaries, they'll like go crazy,
They freak
or
out.
they
Yeah.
freak out because they're like, oh, I don't even know this person. Like I've never seen this. So they reject, like, escape it, if you want to say. But if anything, then they're able to see what they're capable of doing on their own. And it's the
Mhm.
best gift you could get them. And then they'll thank
Yeah.
you for that. Like, thank you for showing me, like, I need to grow, or I need to
Yeah.
evolve. But the only way to do that is if you're holding a healthy boundary between each other. And so it's a beautiful
Yeah.
lesson. Anyways, you went into so many stories of this book, but I want people to really, you teach so much in this book. There's such a wealth of information, but also just lessons to take away, and also tactical tools that people could utilize to go through their personalized healing journey. Again, it's like, try something. If it doesn't work, okay, try something else. It's like, this is through a lot of healing that you did. And I just thank you for birthing this book. It's a beautiful one.
Yeah.
So you could get Glow in the Dark everywhere, of course, Glow in the fucking Dark. And I will include it in the show notes. Also, I know you have a newsletter that you want to mention, like if
Yeah.
people want to join
Yeah.
that.
If you want the easiest way to talk to me directly is actually through the newsletter. Like, I love my Instagram. I'm trying to create just one little slice of not hell on Instagram. So join me there, Tara Schuster. But in my newsletter, I really talk with readers, and it's really grown into this whole community. And so you can sign up for it at my website, or taraschuster.substack.com, where I talk to you. I love talking to readers.
Great. So I'll include that all in the show notes. And so, asking the closing question, and then we're done, because I know I feel it over. So closing question I always ask all my guests is, if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you learned along your very, very, very vast journey that you just feel everybody hears, that needs to hear right now, what would that piece of wisdom be?
It's that you're worthwhile, that just you as you are worthy. Like, the fact that you exist, that you're here, is enough to make you worthy. You don't have to prove it. No one can give it to you. Just remembering, wow, you're a stardust person on the planet. That is someone worthy of love, deserving of being gentle with, and that we all have worth.
Amen. That's so great. I love it. I love it. Okay, Tara, this has
Well,
been an
thank
honor. I
you.
so appreciate you,
Yeah.
and I
Thank you,
love that
Erica.
you're a neighbor too, as we
Yeah,
just
I
found out.
know.
So
Amazing to find out.
so
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for the time, and thank you for all the work you do, and really helping people go through their journey of healing themselves as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And thank you for being a real reader
You're
who knew
so
what was in
welcome.
the book.
You're so welcome.